Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the California Department of Education and the California Community School Partnership Program for the State Technical Assistance Center webinar on Coherence and Sustainability webinar. We do have some instructions if you are needing support with translation. There is a link that will be shared in the chat. It's a Wordly link. Please click on the link and select your preferred language for translation and keep the Wordly tab open to listen or read translations while watching the webinar. Para las personas que necesitan traducción en español, por favor haga clic en el enlace compartido en el chat. Seleccione su idioma preferido para la traducción y mantenga abierta la pestaña de Wordly para escuchar o leer traducciones mientras ve el seminario de web. Bienvenidos a nuestro espacio. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to introduce our Deputy Chief, Erica Torres.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our California Community Schools Partnership Program, Coherence and Sustainability webinar. My name is Erica Torres, and I'm proud to serve as Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction at the California Department of Education. And on behalf of our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so honored to introduce our speakers today. They are amazing. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Navdeep Pural, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services at the Sacramento County Office of Education, and also Joshua Strong, Administrator of our Local Agency Systems of Support Office at the California Department of Education. And we're so grateful for their commitment and for sharing their expertise with us. Next slide, please. Our State Superintendent of Public Instruction has prioritized transforming California's schools, and this vision really frames the work that we're engaging in today. Transformation at its core means looking at education systems differently through a lens of equity, coherence, and sustainability. It also means building systems that are aligned and responsive to the unique needs of the whole child. And this vision, as we know, is rooted in a commitment to ensuring that every student has access to high-quality learning opportunities and the support that they need to succeed in school and in life. It also emphasizes coherence, where initiatives are aligned and connected, and it also calls for sustainability so that the progress that we make today is carried forward well into the future. And that's why we're here today, to explore how we can align our work and sustain this transformational program and initiative for generations to come. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. It is now my honor to introduce Dr. Navdeep Pural, Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services at the Sacramento County Office of Education. And she's going to guide us into the next part of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you all here. Just wanted to highlight our S-TAC, our State Transformational Assistance Center for the California Community Schools Partnership Program. This S-TAC is led by the Sacramento County Office of Education in partnership with the National Education Association, UCLA Center for Community Schooling, and Californians for Justice. Next slide, please. So our outcomes for today, as Dr. Torres mentioned, we're really thinking about alignment, coherence, and sustainability in this webinar series. And today we're really focusing in on gaining a deeper understanding of how some of our plans that we have at our schools and our districts, such as our local control and accountability plan, our school plan for student achievement, align with the community schools implementation plan and the framework that we are all leading with in implementing community schools. We're also going to learn and hear from 3 local education agencies around their alignment and sustainability strategies. We're then going to have an opportunity to go into breakout rooms and engage in discussions to connect with each other and share highlights, insights, opportunities, and any promising practices that you all are implementing in the field around coherence and sustainability of the community school strategy. We also then have a tool that has been developed on aligning and sustaining community schools to support with your planning and alignment of your LCAP and your SPSAs with community schools implementation, and hope that you leave with some actionable next steps to really strengthen coherence across these planning processes to advance sustainability of our community school strategy. Next slide, please. So LCAP, SPSAs, and community schools implementation, right? How do they align? Where are the opportunities? And how do we really think about coherence with 3 different plans? And so when we think about grounding in the California Community Schools frameworks, we as teams and cross-agency teams, CDE and the S-TAC, have identified that there's several opportunities of alignment between these 3 plans. Really thinking about the engagement that needs to occur with the implementation of each of these plans to support our students, our families, and our community members. We know that also within this framework, we know that there's a need for data analysis to really think about assets and needs assessments as one of our proven practices. We know the LCAP and SPSAs also require those. And also thinking about what are our overarching goals to support student achievement, climate, and engagement within our school communities. Also thinking about outcomes for all students as well. So if you look at these pillars, really thinking about the active family and community engagement, collaborative leadership practices, and you'll hear soon from our partner at the CDE about how those opportunities also align with the LCAP and SPSA processes as well. And so always wanting to connect back to our community schools framework and highlighting the alignment and opportunities we have to align these programs and these plans. Next slide, please. And also to highlight the 5 capacity building strategies for our community schools. Shared commitment, understanding, and priorities. Once again, what are the shared commitment, understanding, and priorities across the 3 plans? We're talking about one school and a school at a time with these community schools implementation plans and SPSAs. And broadly as a district, we're really thinking about how are we aligning our LCAPs and our SPSAs and our community schools implementation plans and ensuring that there's a shared commitment and understanding. Also wanting to elevate here this idea of capacity building strategy around centering community-based learning. All of these strategies in service of learning, in service of ensuring that our classrooms are spaces where students are thriving, where outcomes are increasing. Also collaborative leadership, the SPSAs, LCAPs, and community schools plans, of course, elevate the importance of collaborating as educators, as team members, thinking about staffing and sustaining staff and resources, and of course, the partnerships that we have with our students, our families, and our community members. So with that through line of the various plans and the opportunities we have to align, next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Josh Strong from the California Department of Ed to share a little bit more about what the LCAP and SPSA are. And as you're listening and thinking about this in your roles as community schools implementers, thinking about the opportunities of aligning and coherence on these plans. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Josh.
Great. Thank you very much, Navdeep. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you. As you heard, I'm Joshua Strong. I'm the administrator over the Local Agency System Support Office at the California Department of Education. And my office is responsible for implementing the planning at the LEA and school level throughout the state. If we can go to the next slide. So in laying down a little bit of background, in 2013, California revised its funding formula and its accountability system. And as part of developing that out, there were 3 foundational principles that were really key in this development of what's become known as the local control funding formula, or LCFF. The first of those foundational principles is that LEA level improvement is based on multiple measures of success. So there's not just one way to measure success. We're looking at multiple ways of measuring success. And that's really key when we're talking about community schools, because there's going to be multiple methods of deciding how things are being successful within those community schools. It's not just about data, it's also about input from educational partners, from stakeholders, and making sure that that's part of the process that's taken into account when we're evaluating what success looks like. The second of those foundational principles is that of equity. Within LCFF, there's an additional requirement related to specific student groups, low-income students, English learner and foster youth students, where there's additional funding that's associated with those students at the LEA level, and then a requirement to increase or improve services for those students in proportion to the increase in funding. And as we're all aware, within community schools, that component of equity is something that really is key. We're looking to improve outcomes in multiple ways for students and families throughout the community. And so being able to leverage this equity within the LCFF is something that's hand in glove with the community schools. And then the third aspect of the foundational principles is this idea of subsidiarity. And the idea of subsidiarity is that social and political issues are best dealt with at the local level. And so this reinforces what Navdeep talked about earlier with those shared decision-making processes. Really making sure that there is input from the community members, from students, parents, and from others within the community in ensuring that there's a shared decision-making process. And of course, that necessitates both transparency and collaboration when we're talking with our educational partners. Next slide, please. Another aspect of the local control funding formula related to the funding is that all LCFF funding is unrestricted funding. And what that means is that it can be spent on any purpose that's allowable under California's education code. And part of the reason I wanted to bring this up and touch on this is because when we're talking about sustainability, as various funding sources phase out, whether that's COVID funding, whether that's the community schools implementation grant, or other sorts of funding. As those start to phase out, it's possible for LEAs to be able to use their LCFF funding in order to continue to sustain the work and the momentum of community schools. If we can go to the next slide, please. And the other part of this that I want to bring in is this requirement within LCFF to increase or improve services for low-income English learner and foster youth students. Now, as we're all aware, there's a large percentage of students within our community schools that are low income. It's one of those aspects that was part of the application process. And so this really allows for an LEA to be able to meet two different pieces, two different requirements at the same time. Because within the LCAP process, it's possible for an LEA to be able to make progress towards meeting its requirements to increase or improve services for its low-income students, while at the same time continuing and sustaining that work of the community schools process. And so these are three things that I wanted to bring up prior to getting into the planning, just as it relates to LCFF. So let's go to the next slide and begin talking about the Local Control and Accountability Plan, or the LCAP. The LCAP is a state level requirement in California that requires all LEAs, charter schools, school districts, county offices of education, to develop, adopt, and annually update a 3-year LCAP. Now, the LCAP is required to include a description of the annual goals that it's going to achieve for each student group within the LEA, for each of the state priorities and any local priorities that have been identified by the governing board or body of the school district, county office, or charter school. And the LCAP is also required to annually review the effectiveness of the goals, actions, and services from the prior year and report out on that progress. Next slide, please. Now, when we're talking about the state priorities within LCFF, there are 10 state priorities. Now, 8 of those priorities are applicable to school districts and to charter schools. And the additional 2 priorities, 9 and 10, those only apply to county offices of education. So in general, we're going to focus on the 8 state priorities that are there. But what we really want to do here, if we can go to the next slide, is dial in how these state priorities are really tied into the pillars within the community school process, because there's a distinct correlation between those LCFF priorities and the community school pillars. As you can see on this table, when we're talking about integrated student supports, that's clearly part of the pupil engagement and school climate priorities. Expanded learning time is tied to pupil achievement and to course access. Family and community engagement is tied to the parent involvement priority. And collaborative leadership is tied both to basic services and school climate. And so these are ways that the priorities interact with the community school pillars, and the two mutually reinforce each other. If we can go to the next slide and look at the specific student groups that are called out within the education code related to the local control funding formula. We have ethnic subgroups. We've got socioeconomically disadvantaged students or low-income students, English learners, long-term English learners, students with disabilities, foster youth, and homeless youth. And each one of these groups needs to be called out within the LCAP as long as there is a numerically sufficient number of them. Now, for most of these groups, that number is 30 or more. But when we're talking about our students with disabilities, our foster youth, and our homeless youth, that's 15 or more students. So ensuring that these various student groups are captured within the LCAP and that the needs of those students are being addressed is something that is being done within the LCAP. It's also something that is being looked at as part of the community school supports and how best to meet the needs of the various students that are there. Next slide, please. So I wanted to tie in this particular piece of education code because when we're talking about the LCAP, it's really important to understand the purpose of what the plan is supposed to do. And this particular piece of education code, 52064E1, really is the key to understanding the purpose of the LCAP. The process of this is intended to support comprehensive strategic planning, which is something that when you're working at a community school, you have to be able to do a good job of and work through well, because you're not just looking at what's going on in one specific area. You're looking throughout the total program that's being provided by the community school, by those wraparound services that are there. And not just in one single year, but you're probably looking at multiple years, and how best to frame out the processes that you're going to need to implement, not just in the current year, but in future years as well. It also highlights that accountability, making sure that not only the LEA is meeting certain legal requirements that are there, but also that it's being responsive to the needs that have been identified by the community and by the students and parents within that community school. And then there is this idea or a principle related to addressing and reducing the disparities in opportunities and outcomes between pupil groups that are identified on the California School Dashboard, as well as any locally identified priorities through the meaningful engagement of educational partners. And, one of the key foundational things within community schools is really seeking to reduce those disparities in opportunities and outcomes, to provide the those wraparound supports and the services that students need in order to increase or improve their performance, and not just the performance of the students themselves, but also, the families and the community as a whole. So let's go to the next slide and talk briefly about the various sections of the LCAP. And when we're talking about the sections of the LCAP, there's some that I want to highlight because they have a particular emphasis when it comes to the role of community schools. So the sections of the LCAP begin with what's known as the LCFF budget overview for parents. This is really intended to be a high-level summary of the funding that's being received by an LEA, as well as how much of that funding the LEA intends to use in the coming year, and looking at how the LEA is meeting its requirements to increase or improve services for low-income English learner and foster youth students. Then the plan begins with the plan summary, which is an overview of the LEA, who it serves. It provides some information on dashboard performance, on any technical assistance that's being received, as well as the comprehensive support and improvement, or CSI eligibility for any schools within the district or within the LEA. Then we get into the engaging educational partners section, which is where the LEA describes how educational partners, how community members, parents, teachers, students, other school staff have been involved in the development of the LCAP. And this is where you can see that shared decision-making that's captured, because there has to be a reflection on how the feedback that's been provided has influenced the LCAP. Where does it show up within the goals and the actions that are included within the plan? And it provides that ability for those that have provided that input to go back and see how that has been put into effect within the plan. Then within the goals and actions section, you see not only the goals that have been identified for the LEA, but also the measures of progress that are in there and the specific actions that are part of each goal. How is it that what things are being done in order to help the LEA achieve the goal that it has outlined? And within that, this is really where you're going to see those specific pieces that relate to the implementation of community schools that are called out in there. whether that's related to health, whether that's related to transportation, whether that's related to academic supports, expanded learning opportunities, etc. Those are all going to be captured within the goals and actions section. And then we get into the increased or improved services for foster youth, English learner, and low-income students section, where the LEA is describing how it's meeting that requirement. If the LEA is going to use its increased or improved services as a way of supporting its community schools, there's going to be some additional information that's going to be described here in terms of how the various actions are going to increase or improve services for those low-income students, and really help to ensure that the progress that's intended by the action is being made. Then the action tables, which is kind of a summary table showing the way that all of the actions are being implemented, at what schools, for what student groups, and then how much funding is associated with them. And then, of course, the instructions. So having talked briefly about the LCAP and its purpose, let's move on in the next slide and talk briefly about the School Plan for Student Achievement, or the SPSA, because the SPSA is the companion to the LCAP. The LCAP is the district level plan. The SPSA is the school level plan, and the two of them ideally should mutually support each other. You want to have plans where the district initiatives that are described within the LCAP are supporting the needs within the school SPSA that have been identified and addressed. And you want to have the school SPSA being able to help that school make progress towards the district's goals that have been outlined within the LCAP. So the two of these should ideally really be working in tandem. Now, one of the things that I want to point out when it comes to the SPSA is, while most schools will have a SPSA, not all of them do, because the SPSA is a specific requirement for schools that are operating a Title I school-wide program, or that have been identified for comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, or additional targeted support and improvement. If your school doesn't fall into one of those categories, then your school is not required to have a SPSA. However, lots of schools that aren't required to have them still have them, because it's a good planning tool to have at the school site in order to really help make decisions and to ensure that the needs that have been identified at the school site level are being met. The SPSA is a strategic plan that's intended to maximize resources, minimize duplication, and improve student outcomes. It needs to align with the LCAP, as we've already talked about, but the LCAP also needs to align to the SPSA. It's a two-way street. And the school site council is responsible for developing, reviewing, and annually updating the SPSA and the budget that's part of the SPSA. And this, again, is part of that shared decision making, because as part of the school site council, you're required to have administrators, teachers, school staff, parents, and if you're at a secondary school site, students as well. And so you have these representatives from the community, from the school, that are working together in order to ensure that the needs of students within the SPSA are being addressed. So let's go to the next slide and talk about the SPSA requirements and the various pieces that are part of the SPSA. And you'll start to see how SPSA requirements kind of align in a lot of ways with the requirements within the LCAP. The SPSA requires a comprehensive needs assessment based on state dashboards data and local data. This is similar within the LCAP process to the to the annual update where you're reflecting on the progress that has been made and looking at how things need to be adjusted. Then we've got the goals, actions, and strategies. And again, there's portions of the SPSA that I'm going to highlight simply because they really align well to the community schools pieces. So we've got the goals and strategies, which is intended to improve outcomes for students with evidence-based actions. Similar to the goals and actions section within the LCAP, this is where the school is able to set out specific goals and strategies for how it's going to implement and meet the needs of students within that school. Then you've got the equity in subgroups. Again, touching on the concept of equity here, which is part of the community schools. And really looking at how we're addressing the needs of student subgroups, socioeconomically disadvantaged, English learners, students with disabilities, etc. And how are the needs of those students at the school site being addressed through this plan. Then parent and partner engagement. So this is the school level version of the engaging educational partners section within the LCAP, really looking at how the community has been involved in collaborating in the development of the school's plan. And then the monitoring and evaluation piece, looking at specific measures of progress, how those are being measured, and making sure that those are revised and reviewed on an annual basis to ensure that progress from one year to the next is being made. And then lastly, the budget and expenditures. This is really looking at how fiscal resources that are available at the school level are going to be used in order to support the goals and strategies and in order to improve outcomes within the school plan. So then let's go to the last slide that I've got for you all today and really look at the LCAP and SPSA alignment and what this looks like. Now, there's a few differences. The LCAP is a 3-year plan. It's a state requirement. The SPSA is a school level plan. It's a 1-year plan. It's a federal requirement. So you're going to be, but in the case of both of these, there are similarities. One of them is you're looking at these plans, you're reevaluating them, you're potentially revising them each year. As part of the annual update and revision process. Also, both plans require the engagement of educational partners, of the community, of stakeholders in developing the plan and in ensuring that the voices of those individuals are heard as part of the development of the plan. So touching again on that shared decision making. And then identifying those measurable outcomes. In both plans, you have to identify not only what it is that's trying to be achieved, but then how you're going to measure that. What measures of success do you have? And that's also going to be evaluated on a regular basis. And then both plans include goals that are based on identified needs. They include actions that are designed to help achieve the goals. And they have analysis that's based on that data-driven evaluation, going back, looking at the data, collecting input from the community, and using that to inform the further development of the plan, any additional adjustments that need to be made to actions or services, and looking at how to continue the momentum that has been built from the previous year. In order to continue to help students make progress. And then there's alignment. That alignment there is really intended to ensure consistency and to support the continuous improvement process. We realize that this isn't something that's going to change overnight. It's not something that's going to change in a single year. It's going to require a sustained commitment over time. And this is something that I'm sure you all experience within community schools. Continuing to build out the robust strategies and supports that are really going to help that community be able to advance, to continue to make progress year over year, not just 1 year and then it's done, but something that is continuing on. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time and turn it back over to Navdeep to introduce the LEA guests that we have today.
Thank you so much, Josh, for that detailed and thorough explanation. I don't know how you got through both LCAP and SPSA so seamlessly. Phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you. We do have a hand up from Nancy Dempsey. I think the question might be for you, Josh. So before we get into the LAs, and I see another hand pop up, so maybe we can take a few questions on the LCAP and SPSA portion, if that's okay. So
Absolutely.
great. All right, well, I'm seeing the hands down now. Are there any questions for Josh on the presentation on the LCAP and SPSAs? Well, the hands went down now, so.
I do have a quick one,
Oh,
Nav, that came up in the chat, if
Natasha,
that's
yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a question about slide 15, and folks are wondering if it should say racial and ethnic groups, because currently it only states ethnic groups.
Yeah, racial and ethnic groups is correct. I think the other thing that should be noted is when it comes to priority 3, the full title of priority 3 is actually parent involvement and family engagement, because it's recognized that it's beyond just the parent involvement piece. It also goes into the families as well. And so recognizing that importance of the family unit when it comes to the shared decision making and supporting that student.
Thank you so much, Josh. Wonderful. All right. Well, then, without any further ado, I'm so excited and honored to be able to introduce our district spotlights for today. So, we really wanted to provide an opportunity for you to learn about the opportunities of aligning your community schools implementation with your SPSAs and your LCAPs, with some background on how, and now you're going to also hear about how districts are doing this in our state. And so I am so excited to introduce Georgia Rett, who is the superintendent at Arvin Union School District. So you'll be hearing from Georgia first, and then we're hearing from Cara Molina, Executive Director at Ontario Montclair Unified School District, and Julie Baskins who is the Community Schools Lead and Health and Wellness Services at Ontario Montclair Unified School District. And then you'll hear from Dr. Lupe Gomez, Director of Community Schools from Santa Ana Unified School District. So thank you all for being here. And as you're listening to these presentations, these wonderful participants and presenters today will also be joining one of the 3 breakout rooms. So as you're listening to the presentations and you're listening about their context and the work that they've done in aligning community schools implementation at their site and district levels, be thinking about where you might ask more questions in a breakout room. You will be able to pop into other ones if you get your question answered. So you will have 20 minutes in breakout rooms after the presentations. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Georgia. Thank you again for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. You have slides to move forward? Perfect. So I love hearing Josh, who crammed a whole year's worth of work into a couple of slides and make everything seem simple. Josh, we love listening to you every time you do a workshop because it helps us to keep things to where we're able to describe what we do. We are Arvin preschool through 8 school district on the southern side of Kern County, right? If you were to come over the Grapevine headed north, that's kind of where we are. And we're in year 2 of the community schools grant. And so kind of working backwards from the pillars that are part of community schools, we started with the LCAP as our strategic plan and then worked to integrate those different items as they met the goals that we had developed over time, which have changed from 4 to 6 to 4 back to 6. just as time has gone on. So each of those pillars that everybody that's on this webinar is very familiar with community schools, will hopefully you'll see embedded into the work that we have. Next slide. So our demographics, when we talk about changing data and always going back and getting additional input and having that ongoing conversation back and forth, over the last couple of years, our demographics have changed probably more than they have in the last 20, other than growing as a community over time. We're now declining enrollment. We were over 3,000 a couple of years ago, and we're headed toward being a small school if it keeps up the way it is. We're losing about 120 to 150 a year the last couple of years. Part of that, people self-deporting, some of them just moving out of California. But among multiple districts in Kern County, we're at the higher end of declining enrollment. And that's affected us as we look at our funding. It's affected us as we look at how we implement different programs. Socially economic disadvantaged, thankfully, is decreasing slightly. There are more opportunities for people to work outside of agriculture, which is where most of the jobs were previously. And so that number is decreasing, but still largely socioeconomically disadvantaged when we look at all of our school sites. Some a little bit more impacted than others, but all of our schools, we have 4, have similar demographics in that manner. A high Hispanic population. Our English learner population is declining. We used to be up in the 60s, now headed down as students enter. But as students are entering, their initial scores are actually lower than they've ever been. And so that's an interesting dynamic as we come out from COVID, and there's some impacts of those little guys that were born during that time. Our LTEL population is higher than we wish it would be, which is where some of these supplemental funds come in to support. And homeless is relatively small for us, around the 100, 125, depending on the year, kind of that 25 range. The number that is increasing, all of those numbers are holding steady or decreasing. Our students with disabilities, we're up about 3% over the last couple of years. And so that, because it is not included directly in the LCAP, still, obviously, we service those students as they meet the other student groups, but that's a significant impact to the budget that isn't part of LCAP directly to service them as a student group, although recognized by data. Next slide. So our district vision is working together to ensure all students become lifelong learners. And that came out of about a 10-sentence paragraph that nobody could remember. And so we decided a couple of years ago to really narrow that down. Everybody could remember the mission, everybody working together to support students, no matter what it takes, but the vision was way too long. And so when we narrowed it down to this, working together kind of goes along. We just had a professional development at the beginning of the year, and one of the tasks was to do a chant, a song, some kind of way, a one-pager to represent what Practice Zero stands for, which would be setting goals based on data. And so when we work together, we want to ensure that we have common goals. That's why all these initiatives fit together, because if we have different plans with different goals, we're not on the same track, and then we're spending money kind of random, and we're not necessarily targeting student groups. No, we're focused on measurable outcomes. And as Josh was speaking to the different priorities, we've gone from having a ton of measurable outcomes to narrowing it down to very smaller amounts that we use for the LCAP, while we still look at data internally in the district, because otherwise we were spending all of our time reporting and not very much time focusing on the doing. Next slide. So the elements that we focus on, which all of you are focused on, would be the dashboard. Also focusing down to the student groups within their significant differences among some of our student groups as we dig in to those different scores. We were in targeted assistance a couple of years ago, managed to get ourselves out. Proud of our outcomes for last year, moving into those yellows, not because of attaining a status, but because of growth. But every bit of growth or maintaining as we move along, obviously we all are looking to that for the long term. as we work to implement different things to support those groups. So as we look at this, depending on what different funding sources are for, which I'll get into in just a minute, obviously Title III assigned to English learners, Title I for English language arts and math. We have taken each of our budget sources and assigned responsibilities for budget spending and goal setting, implementation, measurement, and revision based on who's responsible for which different area, yet all coming back together at what we call administrative council, to all be on the same page so that we are headed down the same track with our goals. The one area, if we can go to the next slide, where we notice that we have significant issues among working on all of those things from the dashboard, we rely very heavily on the assessment for students that comes from California Healthy Kids. This is just a glimpse from the student report. However, staff and parents for the 3 areas that have the big red triangle are very similar, and they're areas where we've seen over time that we haven't had the big impact. And this is where we really are relying on community schools to help us to make a difference. This is kind of like that area of that collaborative leadership and the active family community engagement. Among the other pillars, this is where they really do fit. And so meaningful participation has kind of gone up and down over the years, but significantly lower at the elementaries than the others that are right about the state average. And then as we move over to the middle school, our school connectedness, which at the elementaries has continued to grow and grow and grow, has not followed that same path. And so that's something that we've really looked at within our community schools, as well as we took part or are taking part in a community engagement initiative grant, specifically for the middle school, to work on that. And then the meaningful participation that's down at the bottom, where expanded learning time and integrated student supports can play a role too, when it really looks to the pillars and integrating all of that. Next slide. And so our shortened goals, they're longer than this, but to get them to fit onto a slide, we have 6 goals right now. Basic services and professional development. That is goal 1 in our LCAP plan. There are multiple other funding sources to the side that, whether it's the LCAP addendum, title plans that we only assign Title I to our school sites for their school site plan. The LCAP addendum, we do the other titles. Community schools has its own planning grant. Community engagement had its own plan. LCRCET has its own plan. Migrant has their own plan. ELOP and ACES have their own plans. And so if we were to just write plans and plans and plans and plans, we've learned over time, as you look at all of those funding sources for which we are very fortunate to receive, we have to have alignment. And so anyone who is in charge of writing that grant, whether it's myself, the assistant superintendent, or a teacher on special assignment, or a program supervisor, that they are to lean towards these large goals and then to narrow them down to objectives. So basic services, professional development, social emotional behavior learning, SEL, PBIS, those kinds of things. Comprehensive attendance, we have a significant amount of staff paid out of there. We had a difficult time coming back from COVID. Our attendance has always been relatively good. Coming back, that was a focus that we needed to attend to. And then really right now, for the way that it ties with community schools, is that parental and community engagement. So goal 4, although we lean on it in LCAP and it's included in the school plans, we really lean on that with community schools. Academics, the 1-year growth, that should be in everything. And then English language development, depending on the funding source. And so around, by no means are all of these 5.3%. It was just an easy way to get it onto the graph. Some are significantly more money than others. Millions of dollars in community schools, millions of dollars in LCAP, hundreds of thousands in some of the others. And then some are grants that are much smaller. But these were the key elements that I thought were particularly driven, and that we use data for and pull in and out, and that each of the people assigned to these different funding sources come together to talk about data in the same way. We use all the same data, but yet different people bring different pieces back and forth to the table. So on to the next slide. After our blending and braiding for success and trying not to supplement or supplant, we have $5.7 million that was awarded to our schools in general. We have 3 elementaries, 1 middle school. We're in year 2 of the implementation. We did go through 2 years of planning grant, which we are thankful to have had the time to really reflect on some of this data and to think, how did we best want to use our money? I think if we had started off with implementation, although we had many of the foundational places in place for LCAP, we may not have been able to be so specific with what was really needed. We needed that time to dig into some data that we hadn't been looking at, which was the community assets and that kind of thing that the community schools really does promote. So with that money and the funding and the plan, next slide, our goal is to ensure that obviously our LCAP and SPSAs are aligned, but that the community school as the latest comer in terms of funds is sustainable, whether we have it within our LCAP, within our SPSAs. The community school money will go away. And hopefully if Title I money continues and LCAP money continues, that'll be a little more stable. But we do want to continue our practice. We want to ensure each action moves a metric, and if it makes a difference, we want to continue to fund it. And if it doesn't, we have to abandon some things or we have to modify them over time, which is why that annual LCAP revision is so important. And then it leads to the SPSAs, and then SPSAs lead back and forth, and all of you are going through those same things. And I'm so glad that there's all of us working on the same thing so we can all ask questions at the same time and have the support, because meetings like this, we've learned so much from the other presenters over time, and it helps us all to be stronger so that we can be strategic moving forward and align all of our goals. So that's more or less it from Arvin.
Thank you so much, Georgia. That was very, very informative. Deeply appreciate you being here again and sharing. And now we're going to pass it on to Ontario Montclair Unified School District with Cara and Julie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cara Molina, and my amazing community schools lead here is with me, Julie. We also were going to have our Director of Curriculum and Instruction join us, but he actually got tied up in another meeting. So, but we're going to present on his behalf. So thank you so much for having us. And thank you, Georgia, for what you shared. That was very informative, and we made so many connections to our district as well. Next slide. So you can see in our mission and in our driving commitment, we fully believe in our community, our children, our commitment, our future. The little bit difference that we have is we've actually been implementing community schools work for about 28 years. So definitely have embraced this. Our superintendent, our board, his cabinet, just amazing, amazing support partners with us in this work and fully embrace, really supporting more than just, that preliminary education, that whole child, whole staff, whole community, whole family. And so super thankful that we have that. Next slide. So our demographics, we also similarly are a PK through 8 district, however, a little bit larger. We have 18,000 kiddos. We also are declining enrollment. In our heyday, we were over 22,000. And so some similar demographics, high socioeconomic disadvantage. Our English learners was significantly higher, but we had a targeted support to really help to redesignate. And so while our Hispanic population is still incredibly high, we are really working on redesignating those English language learners. So that's exciting. If you didn't know, we actually are in the county of San Bernardino. And so the largest county in the entire country geographically. So huge, huge geographic footprint. And so in our district, we're a very compact piece where we're fitting lots of suburban areas. High cost of living is actually driving out some of our families. And so it's just incredibly expensive. I can't imagine what they're paying in our communities. It's heartbreaking, actually, oftentimes. And our homelessness percentage is 14%. It's actually 14.4 when we ended last year. For the past 2 years, we've actually had the highest number of identified homelessness in our county. So very, something to think about. And definitely we're all working on improving our identification process. And so that's an area we've really targeted as well. So we do have 34 schools with, offering a variety of programs. Next slide. So for us, we actually didn't do the planning grant since we had been implementing for such a long time. We jumped right into cohort 1 implementation. And so really all of our schools they did qualify with the unduplicated count, but with the priority of funding. In cohort 1, 28 of our schools did qualify. And then in cohort 3, we did add an additional one. Cohort 4, since we didn't do the planning grant, I believe all of those awardees were part of that, but that was okay for us because, again, with the support of our board, our superintendent, they actually matched funding for the remainder of the schools since cohort 1. And so that was just such a huge blessing. Of course, with a lot of money going away, we're looking at alternative, but I'm going to share with you what we're doing and what our plans are for that. But as of right now, all 34 of our schools are still functioning and funding as community schools. Oh, sorry, next slide, yes. Sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Julie to share how we support our sites.
So being the district community schools lead, I work as well as others in our department to support all of our 34 sites. All of our sites have site coordinators, and we hold monthly collaboration meetings with our site coordinators and our assistants so that we can calibrate and we can also further development for our site coordinators, because obviously some have been with us since the very beginning of the grant and some are brand new. So we need to provide that training and also just the good practices going on across the district where they can really learn from each other and share good works and good ideas. We do group and one-on-one support to complete the site implementation plan, the APR, and the sustainability plan. So I work with them in teams, in groups, or even one-on-one, working at taking data all year long so that we are better prepared to do those reports at the end of the year. So we're really working on calibrating and making sure that we're all taking data in the same way, reporting it in the same way, connecting it to their SPSAs. We work as a district, so we provide those connections with the LCAP. And then also looking at how we can best support. Each of our sites are very diverse. We have our K-6 schools, we have K-8 schools, we have traditional middle schools. So the support can look different based upon the needs of the site, and we can really tier that support because sometimes the way that they're implementing and what's going on at their site looks a little bit different. But it really allows us with the work of our team to be able to provide so that then they can work to further the implementation of the community schools strategy at their sites. Next slide.
So wanted to share with you how we're planning to continue this work. So part of what I do is constantly be on the lookout for a variety of funding sources. So we actually have an incredibly comprehensive system of care that we provide in district services, and that doesn't come easy. So we're always looking for additional funding sources. And of course, with the onset of CYBHI fee schedule billing, we were wanting to jump right on board. We jumped on cohort 2 in our area, and so we were really excited to be the first district in our county to successfully generate fee schedule revenue. So that was really exciting. That actually happened because we do both LEA BOP and EPSDT. If you're familiar with those Medi-Cal billing programs, we actually do them in-house. So we don't send them out through a third party. I have actual billers in my department that do those programs. So it was helpful to get us off the ground with our fee schedule program as well. Next slide. So again, with the EPSDT and LEA BOP in place and adding fee schedule billing, we were able to jump right in. Where we have decided to start is really including all of those individuals, number one, who were part of our community schools grant. And so even though we've been doing this work for a very long time, it 100% did not look like what it looks like today from the beginning until now. And so please know that this is something that's constantly evolving and refining, depending on funding sources, depending on the needs. We are really driven by our needs and assets assessments that we do every year, and hearing our community, hearing our families, our students. And so we are starting again with those individuals that were part of the community school site coordinator team. But in addition, we also have student mentors and case managers who provide case management, like social services, to our community. And they were all falling under that identification of certified wellness coaches. And since I do have clinical staff within my district, we're able to have them start billing and fee schedule as well. Coming soon, our next step is our nurses, LVNs, and health assistants. And then we're also going to add community health workers once fee schedule adds them for LEAs. So we're really excited about that. We have individuals that are definitely doing that work, and so want to be able to capitalize and really use this as a great funding source to continue the work that we've been able to refine with the community schools grant. Next slide. So some of the things that helped us be successful with fee schedule billing was to provide in-district staffed billing individuals. Again, I staff them in district, and they connect directly to Carillon, who, if you're familiar, they're the fee schedule entity. We do onboarding, training, ongoing support for all of our practitioners. And so we really felt like this was crucial because we wanted our practitioners to stay focused on providing services, not get tangled up in some of the other clerical pieces or administrative pieces. And so we really wanted to guide and support them through that whole process of getting their certifications, whether they were clinical and what those elements needed to be connected to fee schedule specifically, or if they were PPS credentialed individuals, what that needed to be, and then if they qualified as certified wellness coaches. And again, making sure that we were freeing them up to the best of our ability so that they could focus on providing services, because that's where we really want them to spend their time. We also added the insurance and consent to bill during our enrollment and re-enrollment process. So collaborating with our, for us, our attendance process and our enrollment processes through CWA. And so connecting with that in department. We also embedded our consent for services in our current practices. So we have been, we've had that as a practice for a very long time. So that was an easy win for us. And then for our service logs for practitioners, we do have electronic health records for our licensed individual, whether they be their licensed clinical folks or our licensed health folks. And so they're using that electronic health record. And so the billers are able to extract the data from there. But then for our PPS and certified wellness coach practitioners, we really wanted it to be a little bit easier for them. So we provided them with Excel templates for service logs so that were easy for them to use. And again, for them to not have to over focus on the billing codes, where they're actually focused on the tasks that they're doing. And then we're matching up the billing codes to those tasks. Providing them those service description examples. And then, of course, we want to make sure it's successful. So we do lots of tracking. We're tracking by practitioner. We're tracking the service minutes that they're submitting. And then also what that revenue generated looks like matched up to those service minutes. And so again, we're still, we did a pilot last school year. We're full implementation district-wide this year, but again, still getting that off the ground since it's such a new program. And then also, I want to make sure that it's so important to collaborate with both the certificated and classified unions as you're rolling out this work. Just being partners sets you up for success. And then that way we're not having barriers later on down the road where there's questions about what we're doing, why we're doing it, its impact to the workload. And so I can't emphasize that enough to really collaborate with those unions. Next slide. Sorry, we get excited about this work. And so this is just an example. Of course, it looks very different between the certified wellness coaches billing and our PPS credentialed folks billing. So on this slide, you'll see just a quick example of what we provided them, where it was like the service that they're providing, the words and the language that they're used to. And then in parentheses, it has the billing codes and then what it looks like and what are some examples. Again, these are not meant for copy and paste. This was really meant like if you're going to use this, this is a template so that it'll drive like ideas about how to describe the work that you're doing. Next slide. And this is a similar example just on our PPS credentialed folks side. Their billing is a little bit different. And so we want to make sure that they had good examples and how it's like what they could bill for versus what our certified wellness coaches could bill for. Next slide. And so again, leveraging funding and to support all of this effort, right? The community schools effort is just supporting the entire community, all of our students, all of our families, really building up our community. So utilizing multiple funding sources. And so you can see just a list here of an example of some of them, but it's not exhaustive. I mean, we look literally under every rock that we can find, and sometimes they're smaller grants, 200,000, 35,000, and everything adds to the pot to really make all of this work happen. Next slide.
So this is some of the outcomes that we have experienced in the last year. Just some of the key successes. Definitely, we've seen increase in staff and student engagement, as well as families. Really increasing those whole child and family supports district-wide. We've seen a decrease in suspension rates. Our chronic absenteeism has decreased. And really, it's just sharing those strategies and best practices across sites, across our district. Fee schedule is definitely off the ground. So we are very excited by the potential that has to allow us to continue this very important work. Some needs we're still working on is really looking at still continuing our improvement for our English language arts achievement for our students with disabilities. And then also just sustainable funding sources. Again, that's something we're always doing, we're continuing doing, we've been doing community schools, but this grant has really allowed us to go deeper and wider, and we want to be able to continue doing that because we see the need, we know the need is in our community, and we need to act. And just then that alignment, we're very aligned with our superintendent's goals, our LCAP, our 5-year action plan. We talk about that in our meetings, we push that out to our folks that all this work is connected. These are all the different pieces and how they all work together. Next slide. And then some of the ways it attaches and connects with our curriculum and instruction department. One of our big collaborations is with our Claremont Graduate University, where we have a teacher residency program. So we're always promoting that, keeping our workforce and being able to sustain that going forward as well. And so that's continuing to increase. Next slide. Something we've done this year, we started this Read into Kinder program. It's really coming from our community because it helps to partner and bring these resources to our families. Our libraries are spread out. We are a big district. And so this basically brings it to the school sites where we can provide our preschool and TK students that robust literature and give them access to that literature. So we have a whole program. We did a big kickoff this year. It's really going strong. Our families are very excited. And this was a need that was brought to us from our community. And this is how we act to meet that need. Next slide. We've also added, again, as we're really working to address the needs of that literacy with reading and instruction, especially for our English language learners. So we partnered with USC. We've had 30 plus participants as we're increasing capacity of our teachers and our educators to providing that early literacy training. It's been a very successful program. And again, 30 participants plus going into this year. So this is year 3. Next slide. And then lastly, we have our Spotlight program. That's really our way of showing teachers as leaders. We have Spotlight teachers across our district. We are partnering this year with the Community School Fellowship Program. So we're very excited in the ways that we're going to be able to further that work this school year to really provide that community-based learning and make it in very intensive to the way that we can support it and bring it to our staff and our teachers in our district as a whole. Next slide.
Thank you for providing this space. You guys are amazing, and we greatly appreciate all your guidance and leadership.
Thank you so much, Kara and Julie. Thank you for sharing this wealth of knowledge and experience and really leaning into this idea of sustaining and all that you are doing to sustain this pivotal strategy in transforming our schools. Thanks again. All right, we're going to hand it over to Dr. Lupe Gomez from Santa Ana Unified School District. And we promise we will have time for breakouts with each of these lovely presenters. So take it away, Dr. Gomez.
Hi, thank you for giving me this space to be able to share our journey for Santa Ana Unified School District. This year, we really have been honing in and ensuring that we work together with our whole community. That includes our city. And so we have when our schools thrive, then our city will thrive, right? So we have when our schools thrive, Santa Ana will thrive. And this is just a little bit of our journey as how we went from asset mapping to having shared goals in alignment with all of our plans. Next, please. So our district is about 33,000 students. We have dropped in enrollment. We are in a very dense area in Orange County. I think at one point it was one of the most densest areas in the United States. So we have a lot of people living in a very small area. We have 54 schools that span from TK all the way up to 12th grade. 96% of our students are Latinos. We have 80% of them are socially economically disadvantaged. And then we have about 60% of them are English language learners. So we are working with a high level of Latino students. And so our journey with community schools, although we already had a lot of the pieces about community schools, we weren't doing it cohesively. And a lot of the work was a little siloed. So this has really helped us to really strengthen our systems. So we started with cohort 1 4 years ago with 4 schools. And that included TK8 school, and most of the other ones, the other 3 were elementaries. In year 2, we went ahead and we added 8 additional schools. And then in year 3, we added 4 more schools. And then now that we did cohort 4, we did not get state funding, but the district is supporting an additional 4 schools. So we have a total of 19 schools for our implementing the community school strategy. So everything that we do is we want to make sure that our schools are thriving so that our city is thriving. And in that, we have our North Star, which is our graduate profile. We worked very closely with our community, including students and families, nonprofit organizations, the city, to be able to create and say, like, what is it that we want our students to be able to achieve when they graduate from high school? And so we created this graduate profile together. And so this is our commitment to our city, that when students graduate from Santa Unified School District, they will be architects of their learning, a collaborative leader, a global innovator, empathetic communicator, a community builder, and a world-ready scholar. And so everything that we do is back to our North Star. Like, how is it that our LCAP is supporting that our students end high school with these capacities under their belt, right? And so we want to make sure that every student thrives because then that will make our schools thrive and then our city will thrive. So the way that we went about it is, as one, we created our graduate profile. We had a lot of listening sessions, groups coming together to try to figure out, okay, what are the things that are most important? It was a 2-3 year process, so it wasn't easy to get here, but we're very happy now that we do have our graduate profile. And so now that we have our graduate profile, everything we do starts off with asset mapping. Specifically in our 19 community schools, everything that we do is around asset mapping, because we really want to make sure that we leverage the resources that we already have. And oftentimes that was something that we would miss, is starting with what we already had. So we focus on our assets, and then once we have our assets, then we can go ahead and do the needs assessment. And then we say, okay, then what are the needs? And then based on those needs, then we begin to start prioritizing what are our goals. And this begins to start shaping our LCAP, will then shape our school plans, and then will shape our implementation for community schools. And so as we are doing the asset mapping, the needs assessment, the listening sessions, one thing that I'm very proud that our district does is we have listening sessions at every single one of our schools. That means that our superintendent, our executive cabinet goes out to schools to listen to families to see exactly what are your priorities, what's top of mind. And then that's really what's shaping our LCAP. We do those listening sessions in person, and then we have a window that's opened that allows our families to provide their thoughts on thought exchange. And so thought exchange is, you put in your thought and then families begin to start rating them, whether they're important or not. Thought exchange is open to all of our families, our students, our staff, and all of our members in the community. And so, once we do the listening sessions, we begin to start aligning everything to our LCAP, our SPSA, and our community school implementation. And then all of our community schools are just focusing on 3 core priorities. Right now, we really are honing in on clarity. And really understanding the difference between clear and clarity, and how we get our community around clarity on what those 3 priorities are and how they will help us to reach that graduate profile, which is our North Star. And so that in a nutshell has been our journey on how we align things. I know I ran pretty fast, but thank you for your time and for allowing us to share a little bit of our story.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gomez. This was amazing. I really appreciated your alignment journey, really thinking about, the 3 plans, the process, and all of them really including asset mapping, needs assessment, listening to our community, engaging our community, and centering on our priorities. So once again, thank you all presenters. And now for the next slide, we are going to have some breakout room time. So we will have we'll have Georgia in breakout room 1 representing Arvin. So if you have questions, any follow-ups, if you want to have discussions, please go ahead and join breakout room 1. Kara and Janet will be in Ontario Montclair room 2. And then in room 3, we'll have Dr. Lupe Gomez for Santa Ana Unified School District. So please go ahead. We'll probably be in there for 10 minutes with time. But we appreciate you, and please use this time for networking, asking questions, posing questions with other participants, but please go ahead and select your breakout room. You were in mid-sentence and completely understand that was not enough time, so we are taking that back for consideration as we plan our next webinar. So Cecilia, if you could start sharing again, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. We are going to close, but first we are going to share our LCAP, SPSA, and Community School Sustainability Tool. Some of the feedback we received from our first launch of our webinar, which was Community Schools and Expanded Learning Opportunities Program Alignment, is what do we do with all this information? So we really listened to you all and appreciate your feedback. So this is actually a tool. It's linked there on this slide. Some steps to really aligning your LCAP, SPSAs, and community schools implementation for sustainability. We understand that you heard a lot of wonderful tips and strategies and journeys that 3 of our LEAs have taken on this alignment strategy. But here have listed 7 steps that may be helpful in thinking about the alignment. So embedding aspects of the pillars and the framework into your LCAP goals and actions, using the SPSAs to really reflect site-specific community school plans, because we know that there is a community schools implementation plan for each site if you are a grantee. Leveraging the assets and needs assessments that are completed with the community schools implementation to inform the LCAP process and development. Include community school metrics in the LCAP and SPSA monitoring, so you're tracking in those plans as well around implementation. Aligning budget and funding streams. We heard from our LEAs on aspects and opportunities to align funding for sustainability. Creating district and site governance structures. So we know that in part of community schools implementation is really thinking about a district, LEA, and site level steering committees for community schools. We know that there have been some site level schools that have kind of combined with their school site councils, and even at the district level as well. Really talking about LCAP development, needs and assets, and along with community schools implementation. And then finally, really, I think one of the most important as well is really telling our story of community schools through the LCAP and SPSAs. So how do we talk about sustainability? How do we ensure that we are demonstrating the impact that all of this input is having? We are doing so much. You all are being so creative and developing such great strategies and programs to support students, families, and communities. How do we share that in these LCAPs and SPSAs, and how do we communicate that to also really have this eye towards sustainability? As folks hear about the great work, we're going to find opportunities to continue to fund the great work that's happening and the supports that are being provided. And so next slide, please. So that's a tool for your reference. We have linked some resources here that you can peruse. And on the last slide, we would greatly appreciate it if you could please complete our feedback form. Your feedback supports us in continuous improvement. And we will also be emailing all participants with a recording of the webinar and this feedback form as well linked. So please complete that. And our next Coherence and Sustainability webinar is scheduled for November 4th from 3 to 4:30 again. And we will be emailing that topic out very shortly to you all. And thank you again for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. And once again, presenters, Josh, the LEA presenters, thank you all so much. Can't do this without you all. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care.